It may be one of the strongest wide receiver groups in years, but you can't win your league without nailing your wide receiver picks. Today, I'll take you through all the best receiver picks to help you win your league on the Fantasy First Down. Well, things are heating up as we hit the back end of draft season. And here in Australia, they're literally heating up because it's expected to hit 99 degrees on this winter day. Absolutely crazy. But all the heat here is going to be about wide receiver rankings. Let me take you through my top 50 wide receivers and talk about the guys I think you should select if you're going to win your fantasy leagues this year. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. You can also check us out on Instagram at the Fantasy First Down, on Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O. My website is ffdfantasyfootball.com. That's where you find my rankings. And my articles are at football.rasball.com. But let's get into the wide receiver rankings. So, kicking things off, and it's all the same at the top end. CeeDee Lamb is still my number one. I believe the whole time he was going to get a deal done, and I always believed he was going to be the top receiver this season. He was number one last season. Just keep it simple. That doesn't mean he's going to be number one this year, but he's certainly one of the safest options around. He's basically all they have in Dallas. Tyreek Hill is number two. For me, he's a little bit more dependent on good quarterback play, and that moves him down a little bit, but he's so explosive. He can take the ball to the end zone from anywhere on the field. He's someone who's going to be very good in fantasy. Remember, these are half PPR rankings, and PPR, obviously, you can push someone like an Amon-Ra and Brown up a little bit, but for the most part, they're pretty similar, and Hill is excellent in half PPR. My number three is still Justin Jefferson. Some people were surprised by that, given the JJ McCarthy injury, but for me, the McCarthy injury was fantastic news. McCarthy being out means that we get Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold is a better quarterback and a more aggressive quarterback. Plus, they have Nick Mullins as their backup, and he is excellent for fantasy receivers. So I feel like no matter what happens, Justin Jefferson's going to have another good season. He slides in just ahead of Amon-Ra and Brown, would be my number three in PPR, but in half PPR, he's my number four simply because he doesn't score as many touchdowns, but he does have that really good reception base. Jamar Chase is number five, and it does look like he's probably going to play week one, but that's not a situation I particularly want to be involved in. He is still in this same tier as Jefferson and St. Brown. I believe in consensus for fantasy pros, he's number three, especially among the top rankers. So I'm going against consensus with my top ranking guys there, but realistically, I'm just a little bit too scared off from Chase. What happened last season wasn't great, but we understand Burrow was injured. I'm more concerned about whether he's ready for this season, where he's actually going to play, and how the offense goes. AJ Brown slides in at number six. He kind of just fits in this weird middle group between that top five and then the next tier down. I don't particularly love him. He had that big burst of 100-yard games last season, but they brought in Jahan Dotson. That's not going to help him. They brought in Saquon Barkley. That's not going to help him. I realistically think that he's going to be another solid number one option. He's safer than the guys below him, but I don't feel great about his situation, so I'm willing to take him later on. Garrett Wilson slides in at number seven. You've just got to feel that if he's got Aaron Rodgers, he's got to be better, especially compared to how much he struggled last season with poor quarterback play. That's a little bit of a concern. We haven't actually seen him do it, but we know how talented he is. We know this offense should be better. I still feel good about Garrett Wilson this year, and he slides in just ahead of Puka Nacua. A little bit nervous about what Cooper Kupp's inclusion means and how this offense is going to look, whether they continue to run the ball very heavily, but you'd have to think Nacua is still going to be a big part of what they do. Number 9 for me is a big surprise because I believe in ECR he's down at 15 or something like that. It's Mike Evans. He's just consistently a top 12 wide receiver. He was like bordering on top 5 in non-PPR. In fact, I think he was wide receiver 4 in non-PPR last season. But in half PPR, he's still a fantastic option. He gets so many touchdowns, so many yards downfield. He's just a consistent threat. He is realistically their number 1 option. I know we'll see some Richard White, and I know that Chris Godwin will be more involved now that he's in the slot, but Mike Evans is still the number 1 in this offense, and I feel like he's got plenty of upside. Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 10 is a bit of a risk. If you watched my what to expect from rookie wide receivers video, and if you didn't, go check it out. I talked a lot about how much risk there is around rookie wide receivers in their first season, but Jamar Chase did really break that mold, and we have seen teams being a little bit more confident with them in recent years. And I do think that's going to happen with Harrison. They just don't have anything else there. The only fear with Harrison is potentially maybe they just don't use their wide receivers well enough. And that's just a problem with the Cardinals. And if that's the case, bringing Harrison in is not going to fix that problem. Next group, Devontae Adams sticks in at number 11 for me, and PPR is a little bit higher, but he's still going to be a strong, solid option. Gardner Minshew is a bit of a win for him. He's aggressive enough to get a number one receiver being functional. We saw him do it with Michael Pittman last year. So I do think Devontae Adams should have another good season. He slides in ahead of Drake London, who a lot of people have very high. I don't understand how you can have Drake London so high and Kirk Cousins is still outside the top 20 in consensus. It seems crazy to me. I love Kirk Cousins this year and I love the Falcons, but I don't know where this idea that Drake London's suddenly going to be the number one option in their offense comes from. Realistically, it's Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts will still be heavily involved. But London is their number one receiver, and we know that this Ram-style offense does go through their receivers a lot. So I think London has a good season. It's just there's a lot more risk than these guys around him because we haven't seen him do it before, and we're projecting a lot. And we projected a lot with him last season. It didn't go very well. Now we're continuing to do it. Hopefully it pans out this time. Then got the two San Fran guys. Debo a little bit high because he at least had a proper preseason. They do seem to scheme him up a lot more. Brandon Ayuk is arguably the more talented receiver and has more of a true wide receiver role. Debo Samuel's more of like a do-it-all weapon, and he's fantastic in that role. Look, this 49ers team is going to be great this season. If you get one injury to any of their four weapons, Kittle and CMC being the other two, all of a sudden the other three just eat. So you kind of hope for that. I guess I don't really want to hope for someone's injury, but you do hope that your guy stays healthy and gets that role that he needs. CMC is going to be fine regardless, but I do think Debo and Ayuk have so much upside. Chris Olave hasn't been good the last few seasons relative to his talent level. I do wonder how this Saints offense is going to look. They just have no other pieces. It's kind of Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave and a little bit of Taysom Hill. I mean, Derek Carr is not a bad quarterback. He's top 20 for fantasy pretty much every single year. He does check the ball down a lot, though. Doesn't really suit Olave's game. So, I don't know. I struggle to rank him here. I'm lower than most on him, and I feel like I'm still too high. Amari Cooper is a guy that I've flirted with pushing him past him. It's just I'm not really sure what's going on with that Deshaun Watson situation. He was very productive last season despite having 5 quarterbacks. He had Deshaun Watson for a bit, but he also had old man Joe Flacco, who was actually quite good. He had temporary tight end Jeff Driscoll. He had Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who was very average as a rookie. And he had PJ Walker, who's kind of like the backup of the backup. Gosh, it's ugly. And he still managed to produce. He was still the wide receiver 14, and he missed games. So I don't see any reason to believe that he can't produce like that again. He's done it so many times in the past. He's just really talented, basically. Bit of a tier gap for him here for me. I feel like those guys like Cooper, you can probably take a little bit later because most people are taking them later. But those top 15 guys, usually taking him the first 3 rounds. You'll then see Nico Collins generally go here, but I've got DJ Moore ahead of him. The reason for that is pretty simple. I think both of these offenses are going to be pretty good and going to be pretty kind of filtered through their wide receivers a lot, but I think Moore's more clearly the number one in his offense. I think it's very obvious by the amount of money they've given him and kind of the situation they've got that Moore is the number one guy. And then you'll see some Keenan Allen. He's certainly going to be a big part of this offense. And Robert Dunze will kind of be the third guy who kind of develops behind them. With the Texans, that's not the case. Stephon Diggs is used to being the number one, and he's going to come in and make some noise. Tank Dell's still a productive player, and especially with the Texans, they're going to use quite a lot of Joe Mixon. I don't think we can say the same for Chicago. Chicago also has less clear tight end situations. They've kind of got Komet and Everett in a committee, whereas for Houston, Dalton Schultz is a legit part of this offense. So that's why I've got more ahead of Collins, even though Collins will go earlier in most drafts. DK Metcalf, I think, is the clear number one wide receiver in Seattle. I think that he's going to be very good. How good he is, though, I don't really know. The upside's there, but they did bring in Jackson Smith-Njigba, and he's going to be more involved downfield, and that could affect Metcalf. Tyler Lockett's still hanging around. Plus, I do think Noah Fant's going to be more of a pass-catching option this year, and they still want to run the ball a lot. So that's a lot of pieces. Kind of the same issue with Moore and Collins, but it's less clear who exactly the number one is. Cooper Kupp is technically the number 2 for the Rams, but he's still a really good player and he's healthy now. I do think that he could end up outproducing this draft slot. just can't put him ahead of these other guys who are clear number ones when Puka Nacua is so clearly the number one for the Rams. I do think there is that possibility that Cup fades and that age starts to catch up on him a little bit, and plus the injuries as well. Malik Neighbours has dropped a spot. He's out of the top 20 now, but he still should be a pretty productive player. And PPR, I'd move him up a little bit. I feel like they were going to see a pretty passive passing offense for the Giants. I just don't think they're going to be able to move the ball very well, and their O-line's not good enough to allow them to get the ball downfield. But Neighbours is still clearly the number one option. He'll get a lot of that short passing work alongside Wan'Dale Robinson out of the slot. And I feel like he's going to be the clear number one option in this offense now that they don't have Saquon Barkley. So expect him to get schemed up a lot of touches. And for that reason, I think he's going to be very productive, particularly in PPR, but even in half PPR, he's still a good option. He slides in ahead of Michael Pittman Jr. The reason for that is very simple. You've got the number one for a kind of passing quarterback and the number one for very much a running quarterback in Anthony Richardson. Yes, Daniel Jones can run a little bit, but he is ultimately a passing quarterback. Anthony Richardson is not. We haven't seen him function as a passing quarterback. We don't know that he can sustain a number one wide receiver. That's why I'm a little bit scared of Pittman. Jalen Waddle is my number 23, and that's very low. I believe consensus has him as 16. I don't really understand it. He's clearly behind the running game, which is expected to be a massive part of what they do again this year. I don't know why we think that Waddle is suddenly going to take a step forward. Tyreek's still here, and he's still the clear number one option. We're not expecting Waddle to get more touchdowns. There's no reason why that would happen. They're going to run the ball a lot in the red zone. They've still got Mostert. They've brought in Jalen Wright, who can do that. Achan's going to get his touches. It's a bit of a mess there. Waddle's kind of like their fourth option, I guess, behind at least two running backs and Tyreek Hill. I don't know that you really want to take him that early. I still feel uncomfortable about taking him here. I'd consider dropping him even further than this. It's an awkward situation. George Pickens has slid down a little bit for me, which seems weird given they now definitely don't have Brandon Ayuk there. He's the clear number one option, but I just think this passing game could be pretty much non-existent. I think they're going to be very passive. I think they're going to run the ball quite a bit. I just think their offense is going to generally struggle, and that's put me off Pickens a little bit given the role he generally plays. Devontae Smith slides in at number 25, and I mean, he's the clear number two option, and he's an okay number two option for you, but the upside's very, very capped. He essentially needs an A.J. Brown injury, and even if that happens, they've still got Saquon, they've still got Dallas Goedert. Of course, they then also have Jahan Dotson as well, so I don't know. It's hard to feel particularly good about Devonta Smith's upside. You are really hoping for a Brown injury, and that's not an ideal situation. Rashee Rice has moved up ever so slightly over the offseason. I'm feeling a lot more confident about his role in this offense. Marquise Brown being injured initially means that he gets a softer start as well. Plus, it appears he's not going to be suspended at all this season. So that's good news. He's their clear number one option. If he keeps getting enough routes each game and certainly enough snaps, he could be very good. We did see him with limited snap counts for most of last season. He still managed to produce. So if he's out there nearly 100% of the time, that's got to be really good for him. T. Higgins slides in directly after him, and a lot of people have him a lot higher. I don't know what you're seeing. I know that he's still a solid player, but he's very much the number two there. I know we've lost Tyler Boyd, but I don't think Higgins really takes over that role. I think we just see Joseph and a lot more tight end stuff. Their run game's still going to be involved. It's just going to be a committee, but they're still going to see plenty of that. Jamar Chase needs to be given those targets that he wasn't given enough last season. I don't know. T. Higgins has a little bit of upside, but not enough to put him ahead of the guys ahead of him. I still prefer Waddle and Smith as the number twos in their teams, and I think the number ones in some of those teams could have boom seasons. I don't think that's on the card for Higgins without a Chase injury. Zay Flowers have moved down a little bit. I don't feel great about what this passing game is going to look like. All the signs suggest that they want to run the ball heavily and that Lamar Jackson's not going to pass quite as much as last season. Zay Flowers is still the clear number one, but his upside's very capped. I'm quite low on Stephon Diggs, and I think that makes perfect sense. He wasn't very good last year with Buffalo. He now comes across to Houston, and all of a sudden he's not even the number one in the offense. He could chuck a hissy fit and not even play at times this season. That's not out of the realms of possibility, or he could be really solid. And I do think there is a ceiling here that is a lot higher than a couple of the guys around him, but gosh, that floor is low. Keon Coleman, I'm so much higher than everyone else. Most people have him as a outside the top 50 kind of, top 60 somewhere player. He's top 30 for me. And on the Hot Take show, on the Razzball show this morning, or this evening for you, I had Coleman as a top 30 wide receiver as my bold prediction for the season. I don't even think that's bold for me personally, but everyone else seems to think it is. So I'm just going with that as a bold take. I love Coleman this year. He's really talented. He's the clear number one option. I think he's going to be really good. And you don't need to take him here. You can take him rounds later and still get that value. Christian Kirk's someone I really struggle with. He's not getting enough snaps. In fact, I'm going to put Christian Kirk and Jaden Reed in the same ballpark. They're not getting enough snaps. They're both going to be off the field in 12 personnel, I expect. That seemed to be what happened for Kirk before we saw the injury to Zay Jones. And for Jaden Reed, that happened all of last season. Really hard to be a good wide receiver when you're off the field. And yet they've both managed to do it. Kirk was really good last season. He probably is the number one in what's a pretty heavy passing offense. And Jaden Reed was excellent down the stretch last season. He was the wide receiver 7 in the last 6 or so weeks. That's crazy production given he was only on the field 60 to 70% of the time. So both of these guys could be really solid. And if they get the proper snap counts, they're going to massively outproduce compared to their draft spot here. Chris Godwin going to the slot is good. In PPR, he moves up significantly more than this, but I've moved up a little bit in half PPR because I just like the idea of what's going on here. There's only really 3 weapons. I talked about that earlier with Evans. It's he, Godwin, and Rashad White. Godwin might be the third of those options, but he's going to get plenty of targets, and that's going to help you in half PPR. He also has the upside of being a former 2nd overall wide receiver in 2018 or something like that, so he can have big productive seasons. The upside is there. Terry McLaurin is way lower for me than everyone else. I don't see what you're seeing. Jaden Daniels is going to be pretty passive. He doesn't like fitting the ball into tight windows. He runs the ball a lot. They are going to want to run the ball a lot in this offense. I don't know that McLaurin's going to get enough targets to really produce. I know he's the only wide receiver here, but we've seen plenty of offenses over the years where the top wide receiver is still not a top 50 player. I can imagine that happening here. Christian Watson slid up quite a lot for me. I do like, if he's healthy, his odds of being very good this season. In half PPR, he's also helped more because he does have those big plays in him and he produces regularly. I think he could have some really big games this season and some dud games. I think injuries are always a risk with him as well. Keenan Allen is my 36. Look, he could have a great season. I've loved Keenan Allen for so long. I have had him in a lot of leagues over a lot of years because he just so consistently produces, especially in PPR. But I don't like the situation he's going into. He's going into a situation with a rookie quarterback with a lot of target competition. He has thrived off being a target hog. He can't do that anymore. And he doesn't produce enough on individual touches. He's a great route runner. He'll get open, but there's going to be a lot of guys open in this Bears offense. I don't know that this is really going to work for him. Tank Dell was fantastic last year, and I love the talent and I love the upside, but Stephon Diggs kills his upside entirely. He needs an injury basically to Diggs or to Collins for him to really be a productive player this season, because he's not even going to be playing in 11 personnel. And he's only going to be playing in 11 personnel, and that's real ugly because that means he's missing out on 20 to 30% snaps. And I do think we could see some 12 personnel quite a bit from the Texans, given they do have some good blocking options. They need to get Joe Mixon going. So that's going to hurt Dell a lot. I feel like he could be overdrafted a little bit. Brian Thomas Jr.'s dropped for me a little bit. Just the more I think about that Jags offense, the more I think they're going to be really run heavy. And that's not good, especially if you're a rookie outside wide receiver who's going to be trying to produce on big plays rather than getting a lot of touches. I just feel like he's going to have a lot of dud games. DeAndre Hopkins appears like he's going to play week 1, and he is the top option in this offense. Will they pass the ball enough, though? I think with Will Levis, they might choose to. He is good outside the hashes, and that's where DeAndre Hopkins usually operates. So that's why, for me, he is my number 1 guy in this offense. Xavier Worthy, I feel like could be a little bit higher, but he sticks at number 40 for me at the moment. I think that Rashee Rice is still the clear number 1 guy. We're still going to see a heap of Travis Kelce. Marquise Brown is going to be involved once he's healthy as well. The run game's going to be involved. Where does Worthy fit into that? He might be a little bit down the depth chart. We've seen with these smaller guys, they don't always produce in KC, so there's certainly some risk there. Deontay Johnson would be way higher in PPR, but in half PPR, I feel like he and Adam Thielen kind of play similar roles of being those target underneath hogs. Target hogs underneath, that makes more sense. What happens with the deep guys, I don't know. Bryce Young wasn't very good last year, and when he's playing better, what does he look like? Is he using these guys? Is he trying to go deeper? Do we see a really strong running game, or at least a run-heavy game? Do we see the tight ends get more involved? I don't know what this offense looks like. I'm really scared about the whole era of the Panthers in general. I just don't know that I want Deontay Johnson. Potentially might take him if he's there late, but the upside is very capped. Same deal with Courtland Sutton. He's the clear number 1 option here, but gosh, his upside is capped. This offense is going to be ugly. They're going to run the ball a lot. Bo Nix isn't going to be great. He's going to be pretty passive. How much ball is Cortland Sutton going to get? Look, he's going to probably be higher than wide receiver 42 if he stays healthy, but the upside is still not there. Tyler Lockett, I feel like, is being underdrafted. He's still technically the number 2 receiver there, and we've seen him be higher than a wide receiver 43 consistently. So I feel like you can probably get him here and feel pretty good about him as a bye-week option. Jacoby Myers as well is someone who's regularly outproduced this draft slot. He's not very exciting. This offense isn't going to be great, but I do think as their number 2 pass-catching option. I guess Brock Bowers is going to threaten that a little bit, but he's still going to be a really strong option in fantasy, especially because they don't really have Josh Jacobs as that true receiving back now. They're going to actually have to bring someone on to be a receiving back with Zamir White out there a lot of the time. That could probably help Myers, who seems like he's going to spend a lot of time in the slot. Speaking of slot receivers, Ladd McConkey, I mean, I want to have him higher. I do think he's a solid, talented player, but I don't know. I just can't. I think this offense is going to be very run heavy. I think it's going to be pretty ugly. I don't think we actually know who's going to be the top number 1 guy. I think we probably see quite a bit of McConkey involved on those underneath options, but Justin Herbert's a good passer. He doesn't need to check down all the time. I do think he could use Joshua Palmer more than we expect, which is why Palmer's not that far away at number 49. Calvin Ridley slides in after McConkey, and I just don't like this situation at all. He wasn't great last year. He's a bit toxic in the wide receiver room. I don't really want him on my fantasy team. I don't want him messing up the juju of my fantasy team. But more importantly, I just don't think he's going to be particularly good for fantasy. They're not going to have a good offense. Hopkins is still the number 1 guy. No, not for me. Jordan Addison slides in next, and I'm very concerned about how he's going to go with Sam Darnold. Darnold will use a lot of Justin Jefferson. Will he use a lot of Addison? Will Addison even get suspended at some stage this year? I don't love this situation. I think he probably won't, by the way. And I think he probably outproduces this rank, but that doesn't mean I want to put him on my team. The fact that he's actually a wide receiver 40 odd when I ranked him as 47 doesn't get me excited enough to move him up because I want some upside at this part of the draft. And Jamison Williams has a heap of upside. He's a very talented player. If Amon-Ra and Brown goes down, what's this offense going to look like? I think you're going to see a lot of Jamison Williams. So there's upside there immediately. Plus, he is an extremely talented player who's finally looking healthy. He was really good in college, and we just haven't seen him be able to produce in the NFL. I think he could be great this year. Jackson Smith-Njigba slides into my top 50, taking Jahan Dotson's place. Now that Dotson's headed over to the Phillies, I've moved him down a long way. Look, I think JSN's a really talented player, arguably the most talented player in that 2023 draft class. I mean, Puka Nacua might argue about that, but I think especially as a college prospect, JSN's probably the top guy. He was the first wide receiver taken, but that offense doesn't really suit him, and he's certainly not getting the opportunity. He's clearly behind Metcalf. He's probably behind Lockett. There's talk about him getting downfield a lot more. I don't even know if that helps him. I don't even know if that's helpful. In half PPR, it's better than it is in PPR, but I don't know. This whole situation's pretty ugly. I'm generally avoiding Lockett and Smith-Njigba, even though they both have at least a little bit of upside. And my last slide is, of course, this one, which you see every single time. Thanks to those many people who've reached out to get personalized rankings. I think I've done 25, 30 sets of these this season, which has been awesome. If you want rankings for your leagues in the next couple of days, you got to email me soon, or I'm not going to have time to put rankings together for you. I want to help you win your leagues. And to do that, I'll personalize rankings to your exact league settings. It's real simple. I'll send you a list of rankings. You just follow it. You win your league. Everybody wins. And I get $10 US, which is great for me because down here, that's $15. So hit me up either on email at benwasley23@gmail.com or on my many socials, which I'll go through now, just in case you've forgotten them from the start. On Instagram, I'm at the Fantasy First Down. On Twitter, at Fantasy First Down with no O. Our website's ffdfantasyfootball.com. I'm about to send some updated rankings onto there right now. Of course, please like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We really appreciate your support. And you can check out my articles over at Rasball. That's football.rasball.com. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be talking about tight ends. Good luck for your drafts. I hope they go well. And most importantly, just enjoy this fantasy season because that's the reason we play. I will check in with you tomorrow, and then over the next week, I'll have a heap of week 1 ranking stuff, and we'll be talking about how to get those decisions right with your start sits. As always, please make sure you message me those start sit decisions on Instagram or Twitter, or you can comment them below as well if you want some advice going into the season. I will catch you next time.